God didn't make basketball players. He didn't make football players. He didn't make musicians. What he did was he gave us a gift to then fulfill our purpose through that gift. So through basketball, that's a gift that you have, but what is that purpose that you're supposed to fulfill through the game of basketball, through your violin, through the different gifts that he's given us.
Welcome to Coffee Break, where we invite you to walk on the path of self-discovery with us. I'm Liz, joined by my co-hosts Fatima and Grace. We're three women from different walks of life, united by our passion for purposeful living, authentic connection, and service to others. Welcome to Season 2, where we are thrilled to introduce you to guests we call disruptors, individuals who faced major turning points in their lives and weren't afraid to challenge the systems around them. They remained hopeful in the face of hardship, paved their own paths, and positively inspired others along the way.
When you're looking for a mate, you should first examine yourself and see what your deficiencies are, see what your strengths are, and then see if you could get someone who's compatible that will help you with your deficiencies, that will strengthen your strengths. And if you don't know yourself, you'll never be able to attract a mate that could fulfill what I just talked about.
We're excited to host our guest, Jacques Léandre, whose inspiring journey from Haiti to Queens is a powerful testament to resilience and community dedication. From his formative years watching his parents advocate for fairness and equality, to his academic journey through Morehouse College and the CUNY School of Law, Jacques has consistently pursued a path of service and justice. He has made significant contributions in both public and private legal sectors, including his impactful work at Rikers Island and his advocacy for marginalized communities. Today, Jacques uses his legal expertise not just in the courtroom, but in his community, where he's passionate about breaking the school-to-prison pipeline. Jacques serves as the president of his childhood sports organization, the Rosedale Jets Football Association, where he facilitates the Rites of Passage football camp in upstate New York, and is committed to helping young Black men navigate life's challenges. In this episode, Jacques shares his pivotal moments that shaped his life. We discuss the role of family, education, and emotional intimacy in shaping today's youth, and the importance of creating supportive environments for personal and community growth. Make sure you hit the follow or subscribe button so that you're updated on our latest episodes. Enjoy today's conversation.
Today, I am so excited and humbled to be able to bring to the audience of the Coffee Break, Jacques Léandre, Esquire. We met many moons ago in Atlanta because he went to Morehouse and I went to Spelman. And even though the first meeting was kind of rocky, years later, I can consider him a great friend, a mentor, and someone who has such an inspirational story. From Morehouse, he went off to do some work in Miami. Then he went off to go to law school, and he's had an illustrious career since then. He's a family man, and he has been, with all that he has going on, working with a football club called the Rosedale Jets, and he's going to talk a lot about that with us today. So with no further ado, I'm so excited for you to let us know, tell us about your life and your start in Queens. Over to you.
Okay. Well, first, I'm totally honored and feel blessed to share these airwaves and this platform with you, Fatima, and meeting you, Liz, as well. Again, it's an honor to even be able to tell my little story. But as Fatima mentioned, I grew up in Queens. I was actually born in Haiti and came to New York in 1973. I was 2.5 years old. And from there, my parents, who lived in Far Rockaway at the time, moved to Rosedale, Queens. And my childhood has been in Rosedale, and ended up going to Springfield Gardens High School. And from there, my educational journey took me to the illustrious Morehouse College, which was one of the most pivotal experiences in my life that I had. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that growing up in New York, For the 12 years that I was in school, I had not had a black male teacher, except for a substitute teacher. His name was Mr. Mitchell, and we didn't treat him too well, as a substitute. you know, I say that to say, when I arrived at Morehouse College, I met men who looked like me, who cared about me, and who were highly successful. And they were successful in the 50s and 60s. So right there, it eliminated every negative outlook I had of myself. Right there, it eliminated all the excuses. So for me, that was so profound to hear, men who looked like me at the top of the educational paradigm to say, hey, you could do it. And in fact, I did it in the 50s and 60s. So now it's it was 1988. 1988, and so you guys have like no excuses, and it really unlocked my potential as a young man. And I also met some wonderful people along the way, one being my dear sister Fatima. We met on some rocky grounds because we all know, Fatima, she was very
Okay, well, first of all, let's pause because we've known each other
pause.
over 30 years, and he still says my name the way he wants to say it. When he met me, it was Fatima. Now I go by Fatima, and he still has his own pronunciation of Fatima. Can we set the record straight today? Can you say
Okay.
Fatima or Fatima?
Yeah, and I like Fatima, but I did change it. I did change it from time to time,
Right. I'm sorry, but keep going.
But that experience, along with the educational aspect, the social aspect, really helped me to grow as a young person. And part of that was meeting folks like Fatima, right? Meeting folks like Fatima who really challenged, my positions, and was able to kind of have me rethink and relook at certain perspectives. And I think that's what a college experience is supposed to be about. And because of that, I think I've become a better person. I wouldn't admit it to like 30 years ago, but
finally, I get my flowers.
So, I mean, we stood up many nights just arguing about different things about life, religion, politics, what
gender,
gender,
women's roles, men's roles.
oh,
relationships.
Right, we would be heated.
And some of those conversations ended well, and others ended with
Right.
talking to you for a couple of weeks.
Right, exactly. I'm done. That's it.
That's it.
Well, there's something that you said that really had me thinking, because you said going to Morehouse really opened your mind to the fact that there were Black men who were successful. And there's a stat that says right now, of all the men that go off to college to get their higher degrees, 40.8 of them were white males, and only 28.4 are Black males who actually complete. So my question to you is, do you feel like that put some kind of burden on your shoulder? Or at that time, did you feel, because you were in the, I guess we would say, the mecca of Black college, that everybody was going to finish and everybody was going to complete? Or did you realize as you were going through Morehouse, you would look around and your friends were falling off and weren't going to graduate?
Oh, that's a very good question. One of the things they told us during freshman orientation, they said, look to your left, look to your right. Both of those gentlemen or next to you won't make it to the finish line. And at the time, I had a couple friends with me. It was my boy Phil and a couple of others, and we looked at each other.
Phil, yeah.
Yeah, and we said, nah, that's not going. This is a colloquialism that we use. It was like, nah, that's not going to apply to us. We're going to be good. And God has it that we all graduated, and we all graduated on time, which is an anomaly. So we didn't buy into those statistics. In fact, to me, they weren't real statistics, because I knew that I wasn't going home. There was no option but to complete, And part of that was, growing up, my parents would say, you don't do your work, you're going to end up out of doors. And out of doors was a scary proposition. And I really believed what they were saying. Like, out of doors mean you're going to be outside somewhere, not being able to provide for yourself and having a very difficult life. So that was always in the back of my mind. I'm not going to end up out of doors. So
Right, right.
I'm
How
going
would they say it?
to, in
Yeah.
Creole.
Yes.
They would say the nation Creole. So para finir l'école, well, way they all people again on pièce côté pour caler. And basically saying you're not gonna have anywhere to go, so you gotta make it right. And for me, that resonated with me because I really believed them. Like, I don't do what I'm supposed to do, I'm gonna end up out of doors. Whereas for my younger brother, and this is something we crack up about all the time, my mom told him that, and his reply to her, or his response to her was, "Wait, what do you mean? I'll just go live with my older brothers." Like, that doesn't make sense. So it didn't make sense to him. Like, it
Right.
scared the heck out of me and my older brother and my sister. But for him,
Right.
the youngest, he was like, "No,
I'm
I'm I'm
good.
good. I just go live with Jack and Leslie." That I don't understand out of doors. So she couldn't frighten him with, "You're gonna be out of doors if you don't do your work." So for us, it was like, no, we're going to finish, and we pushed each other and actually supported each other and finished. Although on like the periphery, there were one or two friends that was like not in our friend circle per se, but that we were, pretty close with, who didn't finish. And as you mentioned, Fatima, you look and then it's like, wait, one semester, you're like, oh yeah, this kid, he didn't come back from California, or this person didn't come back from Detroit. And then I wouldn't say you forget about them, but like life moves on. But when you reflect on it, you're like, wow, there was a handful of young men who didn't complete the process and the journey.
Yeah, I was like you, Jacques. I felt so honored to be able to go to Spelman, and I always wanted to go there, that there was just no way that I wasn't going to finish. But they told us that the same thing too. And a group of my friends, we said we were going to be the ones to finish.
Mm,
And of my group, all of us did finish, but there are people that I think about that I wonder, what happened to them.
mm.
And so, from the grace of God, that we were able to complete on time as well. So after Morehouse, what happened next? Where did you go next?
I graduated from Morehouse with undergrad degree in finance, and from there, I had received a job opportunity with Bankers Trust, working in their defined contributions plan division, and I worked there for 2 years. But at the time, I kind of realized that it wasn't necessarily my cup of tea to work in investment banking, and I always had the idea that eventually I would want to put up my own shingle, have my own practice, run my own business, be an entrepreneur. And I didn't think that the investment banking track was the track for me to do that. So I decided to go to law school. I knew that I wanted to have my own practice. I also knew that I wanted to use my degree or to help someone or to help people. And initially, I thought it would be doing some defense work, criminal defense work. So I worked at Rikers Island for 2 years. And Rikers
Ooh,
Island it's a jail the largest jail in New York City, where they hold detainees. And I did that for 2 years as an intern during the summers. And I quickly found out that I didn't necessarily want to use my law degree per se to work in the criminal defense practice area, but I wanted to actually use my law degree to make some money that would buy me some time to do the kind of work that I really want to do, which is community work, right? But I didn't necessarily felt compelled to use my law degree per se to do that type of work because I got to tell you, it was very difficult working at Rikers Island, just watching young men that looked like me, same age, but they were receiving what they call football numbers, 10 years, 15 years, and every day watching the bus drive across the bridge with busloads of young people in the back of the bus going up and down, and knowing that their fate now is in the hands of the criminal justice, in the courts, and knowing that Black men traditionally don't get like a fair shake in the court system, it really did something to me. And it also propelled me to do the work that I currently do now, which is working with young people to help prevent them from going down that track and to kind of bust up that school to prison pipeline. It's one of those things where I feel blessed that I had an experience to be in jail without being convicted of something.
right, right.
Because
Mm.
most attorneys, I don't think, ever get that experience. And it also reassured me too that some of the most brilliant and brightest people we have in our community are not necessarily outside the walls, but many of them are behind the walls, and they can't express their brilliance beyond the prison cell. And all that brilliance is now bottled up, and then it manifests itself in different ways that's not constructive or helpful to the community. And whether it's violence, whether it's hustling, or whatever the case may be. So I then felt I really have to work with young people. Number one, to counter what the popular, I guess, model of what it is to be a young Black man in the hood, which is I gotta, be harder than hard. I gotta dabble in street culture, etc., to kind of say, no, before you go down that path, there's a different path that I think you can follow. And it's much easier. Like being a scholar is much easier than being a hustler. being a solid person is easier than being a thug, where you don't have to worry about going to sleep at night and who you did wrong and who may come after you. There are different paths, and that's what I kind of used, my personal time to do, and my professional time now. Well, I use my law degree in different ways other than, let's say, criminal defense work.
Thank you for sharing that with us. So for our audience listening, and for people who might be even interested in bits of your story there, can you explain a little bit more about the field that you're in currently and how you got started?
Currently, I actually have a couple of positions that I hold. One is I'm an arbitrator with AAA, which is American Arbitration Association, and I hear cases primarily between healthcare providers and insurance companies, and make decisions based upon the evidence that they present to me, whether or not the healthcare providers should be reimbursed for the medical services that they allegedly provide to eligible insured persons, or better yet, accident victims. I also work with Local 372, which is a municipal employee union in New York City, which is the largest municipal employee union in New York City, where we protect the rights of workplace members, and ensure that there's some work equity in their workplace. So those are the primarily the two things I do professionally. And lastly, I also have a law firm with two partners, Alan Messina and Kareem Vessip, and it's called Allen V Law Group. And we do exclusively election law, where we represent incumbents as well as insurgents who are seeking political office, and helping them with ballot access and campaign finance, compliance, and really anything related to campaign law.
Thank you for sharing that. This might be kind of a big question, but we also wanted to ask if you feel like your career, the career that you're in now, is your purpose.
Very good question, Liz. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Like that commercial goes, sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. That's for the old school people.
Oh, Miss Joyce got nuts. Mouse don't. We're older than this, so she might
exactly.
Like, wait, that was a childhood commercial.
Okay.
That was one of the commercials. If they were showing commercials during halftime, the Super Bowl halftime, it would have been on the Super Bowl halftime.
Yeah, it was a major one.
Yeah. But as far as purpose, and this is what I encourage a lot of my friends who are professionals. I say, don't allow your degree to kind of dictate what you're going to do for community. You can have your career and also have interest in community development. And you don't necessarily have to use your career for community development, although sometimes you can, and don't make it an excuse for not being involved in community development. And I believe it's one of those things that folks will tell you, choose one or the other. And I'm like, no, you don't have to choose one or the other. And you can strictly have a professional career, and that professional career doesn't necessarily have to fulfill your purpose if it's buttressed by something you're doing besides your professional career on the side. You may do, let's say, tax law as your career. That may not necessarily be your purpose to to do tax law. However, there may have a boys and girls club in your community that you could get into. There may be other lanes within community where you can lend your expertise, what you learned from your professional career, to help communities. our community needs a lot of help, and I don't think there's any, like they said, the streets rejects no one. Well, your community will reject no one as well if you're bringing some skill set to it. And I'm glad you asked that question, because a lot of times folks will really think that, well, since I'm not quote unquote fulfilling my purpose in my professional career, therefore I don't think that I will ever fulfill my purpose. And there's a way to, do your professional career and still fulfill your purpose. But if it gets to the point though where your professional career gets in the way of fulfilling your purpose, then you may have to pivot, because you won't be happy. But I found a balance where sometimes I leave the job at the job. I do the job. Then when I come home, I, put on my football cleats, I put on my whistle, and I coach these young men. So I get that fulfillment, and it actually gives you the drive to go to work, to do something that, let's say, is not part of your quote unquote overall purpose, and to get through the day. Although now, because I'm representing low wage workers, I'm actually fulfilling part of my purpose through my job, and also having fun with the Rosa Jets football organization. So it's always like a balancing act.
Mhm.
You got to find a way to balance it.
Yeah, I love what you said about community development. And I always, because I grew up a part of my life in Selma, and there was so much emphasis on giving back. And, it was a lot of residual mindset from the civil rights movement. And because I saw so many of the older civil rights activists, their lives they'd given to the struggle. And I felt like they didn't have much to show for it, and their families kind of suffered from it. So to be honest, to be transparent, I always had like a awareness towards having my purpose being aligned with community development. Um, but as I've gotten older, I realized that connection is very important. And I always felt like I needed to give back. Can you just talk in general about what to you is community development?
Wow, you all got me on a hot seat. That's a great question. I think it's community development is really anything that's helping to evolve the community in a way that's going to be beneficial, in a way that's
Mhm.
going to increase the standard of living of the community. Anything that's going to make it, the community, a safe and decent place to be. And and a lot of that has to do with the human capital, developing human beings. You develop a human being, he or she will develop everything else around them. So there's the main focus is really developing the human capital that we have, and making sure that we're able to have people see themselves in the way that God, and I don't want to go to church or to the mosque right now, but in the way that God has made us. And we each of us, we have a particular strength, a particular gift that's unique to us in various levels. So I know Fatima is greater than I in some respect in her life, like some gift that God has given her that he hasn't given to me in the same portion. And and she may say many gifts, but I'll say I'll say maybe one or two. And and Liz, God has placed a gift in you that is supreme to others in terms of that particular gift. And when we recognize what that gift is, then we'll start to cultivate that gift, and then we'll be able to, glorify God through that particular gift. But many of us go through our whole lives without knowing what that gift is. And because we don't know what that gift is, we can't even lend that gift to what we think our purpose is. And we go throughout life with an unfulfilled life because we haven't fulfilled our purpose, because we haven't discovered that gift, we haven't cultivated that gift, and we haven't done with that gift what God intended that gift to be. Some of us grow up thinking, I'm a basketball player. God didn't make basketball players. He didn't make
Mhm.
ball players. He didn't make musicians. What he did was he gave us a gift to then fulfill our purpose through that gift. So through basketball, that's a gift that you have, but what is that purpose that you're supposed to fulfill through the game of basketball, through your violin, through the different gifts that he's given us?
That's one of the questions you were going to ask. And we agree, we go to church and mosque all the time on here because we do believe that God is central, and we believe that the ultimate connection is to God. And if you're connected to God, then you can be better connected to the human experience. And so, when did you know that you were here to make a difference?
Oh my, great question, Fatima. I don't think there was an aha moment, but I think it was a culmination of events in my life. And one of those events is when my mom, when I was younger, she always used to say this. I grew up in a very disciplined household, and discipline takes different forms in various households. Well, in my household, the discipline came with a leather belt. Manifested itself through that belt. But my mom would always say when she would discipline my siblings, she would tell me, "Who do you think you are? You're defending them. You're acting like you're their lawyer." And she would say, you're not their lawyer yet. You don't have your degree in law. So she planted that seed in my mind that, you know what, you are a good advocate, but you don't have your degree yet. So
Right.
so when the time arrived, and I looked at my experiences and and I said to my, oh, you know what? I've always been an advocate for the downtrodden, or for the victim. After giving it some thought, I thought about what my mom said, and I had a discussion with her about it. And she was like, "Yeah, I think you would make a great attorney because you've always been this way. You've always cared about people. You've cared about their suffering, even when their suffering was justified." So she planted that seed like very early on in my life. And I think as parents, sometimes it's important for us to kind of identify some of those gifts and help those gifts to blossom. And that's one of the gifts I think she helped me to identify and blossom. Sometimes it wasn't in the best manner, but I got the message.
Right, right. Speaking of your siblings, where are you in sibling rank?
I'm the middle child.
The middle
I,
child. And
I have
so,
an older brother, an older sister, and a younger brother. So
okay.
my older brother is the oldest, firstborn. He gets privileges. My sister's the only girl in the bunch, so she got privileges. And of course, my little brother's the baby of the bunch. He got his privileges. I just came on. I was like a duplicate almost in every category. So it's like, all right, that's him.
All right, that's it. Well, you talked about passing on gifts to your children. Before we go into the Rosedale Jets, would you like to share anything about being a family man, your family?
Of course, I think our minister has taught us that family is the most important aspect of human civilization. And when he said that, I was a young person at the time, but the minister went on to say, you have to develop family to even be considered a human. And I said, wow. And the keystone or the main component of family is when you have a solid mother and a solid father that come together to nurture the children. And a lot of times in this society, it's so very hard to be a solid mother or a solid father because the stressors are like numerous. A lot of the women in our community don't have the support that is necessary to allow them to enjoy life, really. They have to be mom, dad, provider, nurse, doctor, teacher, everything else, and without a break. But the way the society is constructed, it's extremely hard financially. I mean, living in New York City, sometimes I think like some of the members we represent, they only make $45,000 a year, $30,000 a year, and I'm like, how are they subsisting on that amount of money? It boggles the mind. And this society, it makes it very tough for family to flourish, very tough. So I just knew for me that once I was gonna say once my daughter, but once I got married. Although when I got married, I said I do, and I didn't fully understand what that meant, but I just knew and trusted and had faith that the I do that I said was going to make my life better, was going to make my family's life better. But as a young man, I got married at 27. You really don't know the scope of the vows that you're about to enter into. And if someone said they do, no, you don't. But I trusted and I had a lot of belief that if I was to remain steadfast to God, that I would be able to remain steadfast to my family. And when my daughter was born, that was a pivotal time in my life because I was there. The minister encouraged every man who has a woman that's pregnant, whether spouse, girlfriend, or wife, you should be there at the time of birth. And after experiencing that, I understood what he meant, because seeing your child come to life and watching your spouse go through like the portal of death to bring forth life, when things go rough, when things are tough in your relationship, you could always go back to that moment and say, man, you know what? I'm upset with her, but this is the woman that actually went to death's door to bring forth life for me. And when that happens, it helps calibrate whatever feelings you may have had towards your spouse or wife at the time. And it was a life changer for me. Watching my daughter, she popped her head out, boop, crying. I was like, oh man. I said, so I knew at that moment, no government was going to support my child. I wasn't going to go to no doing family court. And even if it didn't work out with my wife, and thankfully it has, we've been married for 26 years, but I knew if it didn't work out, I was going to be the best dad I could possibly be. And I owed it to my wife and to this little princess that God allowed to bring into the world to be as solid as I could as a man. So that experience was like earth shaking. Then when my son was born, I was there as well. And this is how God works. Like there are like polar opposites. My daughter came out crying, yelling, going crazy. And that's her personality to this day. My son came out and he was calm as a cucumber. He was like, boom, and was like, he looked around. And then, they tapped him on the butt. Then he started, but he was calm. To this day, he's still kind of relaxed, kind of calm. They're like totally different. We waited a little while. They're 5 years apart, because when my daughter came out, I mean, she gave us hell for the first 2 years. And I'm like, if the next one is like her, we got to take a break, baby. We got to take a break. And then come to find out, God in his mercy gave us my son, who was like totally different than my daughter, which is like amazing. But I say that to say those experiences, going through those experiences, actually, it grounds you. It makes you have a tie to your family. I think that maybe may not have otherwise have been there, but for those experiences. And not to say that I would have been a deadbeat if I didn't experience that, but what I'm saying is it helps you kind of absorb the fact that God has placed this awesome responsibility and duty on you as a man to be a man in your house.
I don't know if we told you yet, you're our first male guest on our podcast.
Right. So you get to be first here.
Right.
Might not be
Listen,
first in your family, but
I'm the firstborn male in the family. Thank you. Thank you. Oh man, I feel honored, especially coming from Fatima. Oh man.
Yes.
Oh,
So we really appreciate, your perspective and, sharing that story of fatherhood and, as a husband.
Now let's pivot to, what do you believe to be your purpose? And what are you doing in your purpose right now?
what I believe is my sole purpose is to help resurrect our young people from a state of mental death. When I say mental death, I'm talking about taking them from a horizontal plane and resurrecting them into a perpendicular plane, providing them information that would help them to be able to just navigate this crazy world that is unforgiving when it comes to people of color, when it comes to brown and black young people. So I think my purpose is really working with young people to give them and develop and help them identify their God-given gifts. And I do it a lot through the game of football, through our organization, the Rosa Jets Football Association, and also through some of the community work outside of football. We have a mentoring program as well, and also a lot of the work that I do within our faith tradition, which is Islam.
So, what do you think now is the biggest challenge facing the youth in the Rosedale Jets?
There are so many challenges and so many competing big challenges. One of the things I think is a major challenge is the legislation that we have regarding cannabis. You know, now weed is quote unquote legal, and you have children who are learning how to smoke weed and roll up a blunt before they know their ABCs, before they
Mm.
know how to act. They come into school totally sedated, and they'll tell you this is legal, although it's not legal for them, but they'll tell you it's legal. And this drug culture is a culture that many of our young people are being ensnared by, and I think that's one of the big issues that we have. And unfortunately, the legislators are partly responsible because they allowed this to happen and in fact made it law without thinking it through. And yes, there may be some properties that cannabis offers that are healthy. However, we know in our community we don't need additional sedatives. We're already moving lethargically when it comes to helping ourselves. We don't need young people, and now this is going to serve almost as a pretext to police stops, driving while intoxicated, driving while high. So it's just not a good look for us. And I know a lot of our legislators will say, well, there's some restorative justice issues we have there. A lot of young people went to jail for a nickel bag of weed, and therefore, by making
Yeah, that's
weed,
what I was gonna say. What was your position on that?
that's a crock of doodle. Excuse me.
Mm.
I would say
Mhm.
something else, but I don't want to mess up this platform. It's let me say it this way. When we talk about restorative justice, we can't say now I'm going to make weed legal and have the community decimated again, but yet I'm going to restore justice. Who are you restoring justice to? Many of our young people can't even qualify or don't know the roads to becoming quote unquote legal weed dispensaries where they could make them. So and there are levels to this thing. We're talking about, oh yeah, weed is legal, it's natural, and all that other nonsense. But at the end of the day, there are levels to the quality of weed you could get. The weed that you're getting in Upper West Side of Manhattan is not the same weed you're going to get in Spanish Harlem. It's not the
Mhm.
same weed you're going to get in Southside Jamaica, urban centers in New York. It's not going to be the same. The same way the Upper West Side Manhattan, the liquor stores are called wine and spirit stores. And in our neighborhood, they're called liquor stores and they're selling malt liquor. And you won't find malt liquor on the Upper West Side, but you'll find it in our bodegas. And they know now that the fact of malt liquor is much more harmful to the human body than, let's say, wines and different spirits. So same thing with the weed. Now the weed is in our community is being laced with all kind of substances, all kind of carcinogens that I know some of the pure quote unquote weed is not laced with in some of these other communities. This is just a harmful thing for our community, and it wasn't well thought out. Oh, it could have been well thought out because they know the impact of it. So now you go in any city, kids are lighting up. Kids are it's bad because my wife is a school teacher and she said every day kids are coming to school eyes red, they're snacking all the time or putting their head down when they come off that high, and it takes a moment to get them back acclimated to schoolwork once they're coming in that condition. So I think the drug culture is a big challenge for our young people, and the educational system is another challenge for our young people as well. When you have young people in school for 8 hours a day and they're not learning much in the way of making them feel good about themselves, making them feel, that they come from a strong legacy, and that they could become rulers of this world, it's really doing them a disservice. So our young people have a lot of challenges, but it's going to take us, to be the champions. And you can't have a champion without a good challenger. So we know we
Mhm.
got a lot of good challenges. We just got to become the champions now. So those are the two major challenges, I think: the drug culture as well as the educational system.
Thank you for sharing that. I think, yes, our young people, they definitely do have a lot of challenges facing them today, and especially in modern culture. So just having people like you and having, organizations like the Roselle Jets to help support them is really critical. What hopes do you have for these young men that you're working with as a coach 5 years from now?
And I'm glad you also asked that question. I've been coaching now for 30 years.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, this past year they surprised me with annual awards dinner with a 30-year celebration, and we had the Attorney General Tish James there, as well as a lot of other elected officials. And I couldn't believe, I'm like, man, I've been doing this for 30 years, since 1994. And I've watched, generations of young people. Now I'm coaching some of these young people, children, and soon to be their grandchildren. I'm like, this is crazy. So I've seen young people that I've helped, many of them extremely successful. But what really pushes me every day is the fact that I also have young people who aren't as successful. There's one man, he's currently locked up, and I'm so proud of him with what he's doing while locked up. His name is Sean Peace. And I'm sure he wouldn't mind me sharing this with you all because he's working towards his freedom now. He has 108 years, and for a crime where there was no fatalities, and it's just a sad case. But he got married last year, 2 years ago. He got married in Greenhaven prison, and he asked me to be his best man, and I was totally honored, and I stood in as his best man, as he started his new life with his family behind bars, which has its own set of challenges, but it's stories like that that says, Jacques, you got to keep on going. Yeah, you have a couple of young people who are in the NFL right now, and they're doing great things. We have one young man who graduated from med school, but it's always that one person that did not go down the path we anticipated, and who's having a world of pain right now, that makes me say, man, you gotta do better. An extra conversation might have helped. Although he tells me all the time, Coach Jacques, you all did everything y'all needed to do. We made home visits, went to schools, to the school when he was acting up and everything else. And he's like, he tells every time I go visit him, he's like, yo, y'all did everything y'all needed to do, man. And I want to thank you. And he gives, but in the back of my mind, I still think like, was there anything else that I could have done to help, stray him away from that path? So after doing this for now close to 30 years, watching these young men matriculate through life, it has its ups and its downs. And thankfully, I think most of it has been up, but those few downs is what drives many of us who are engaged in youth development to keep going.
So I was looking this up as you were talking, when you're talking about the school to prison pipeline. We've heard a lot about it, or maybe our audience haven't. So when we talked about matriculation to college, it was like 29%. An estimated 28.5% of Black men are imprisoned right now. So we have a little less Black men in prison than actually who matriculate through college. And so I definitely see why this would be your life's work and your mission. And while you said like you have the success stories, but it's that one story that really hits you in the gut. And I think that's how I've lived my life too. It's that one person that I wish I could have made a difference in. And so that for me is my daughter. And that's why, as you know, who passed away in almost 2 years ago now. And so my life's work is around filling in those gaps of isolation and lack of connection, and being a voice for those who feel like they are voiceless. So even though you came from Queens and you had a career that propelled you out of those circumstances, and even then you grew up in a two-parent home with parents who worked. So it's almost like you've had a different life perhaps than the young men that you're coaching. So my first question to that is, what do you think happened differently for you that you took a different path? And then my second question is, when you are able to like compare and contrast your road and their road, how has it changed you?
Well, Fatima, with these powerful questions, you got to ask me one question at a time.
Okay. All right.
We're just so eager to
Right.
know more.
Okay, let's start with the first one. The first one is, you could have gone down that route even with your two parents, because like you said, the streets accept everybody. What do you think was different for you?
That's a real profound question. And there are several factors that I think is different for me. First is by the grace of God. Because
Mhm.
as I reflect back on my life as a young person, although I was considered a good kid, good young man, etc. However, there were some things that I engaged in that, but for the grace of God, my path would have went totally opposite than where I am today. And that's why I'm so sympathetic towards our young people who have made mistakes or who make mistakes. Because as I worked at Rikers Island, I was sitting with young men and reading their case files and saying, wow, that could have been me.
Mm.
That was me. Oh my God. I can't, yeah. When Kevin was stealing cars and he always had a screwdriver in his pocket, and I didn't know why. And then one day he was like, yo, you want to take a joyride? I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, I got this. And he showed me the screwdriver. And in a few moments, I'm in the passenger seat. Ah, and in my mind thinking, well, if anything happened, I just could say it wasn't me. And now as a, at the time as a law school student interning at Rikers, I'm like, there's a lot of stupid stuff that I engaged in that I was an accessory to and did not necessarily calculate doing X, Y, and Z could have ended you up exactly where these young people are right now. So it was really by God's grace and just thinking I'm going to have fun joyriding with Kevin. And Kevin is my man. And he's a good kid because he come from a, same neighborhood, two family, hardworking parents who were hardly there because they were working. And I could have been, and God bless his dad, Kevin ended up passing away. His life took a different trajectory. He ended up getting in trouble during high school, ended up, going to jail, ended up strung out on crack, and then ended up, succumbing to his addiction. And he and we played baseball together. We played on the same football team together. We were, you know, we were boys. And I say that to say a lot of it, I won't say is luck because I don't believe in luck or coincidence. I just think is God's divine plan for my life. And one of the things that makes us able to overcome a lot of the young men that I talked to while I was helping them with their prison or jail cases was the fact that they didn't have the family support to help them during their teenage years. When you have, you get in trouble and you are able to have a family that could absorb some of the trouble that you're in, it can help you. Because there are a lot of young people that get in trouble and young people do stupid stuff. That's what being young is sometimes, testing the waters, not being able to really look beyond the next day. That's why a young person diet is not the same as an older person diet. When we were young, hamburgers, pizza, potato chips, Coke, Pepsi. Oh, I never die. That's how you think as a young person. You get a little bit older, you're like, where's the vegetable aisle? You're reading the labels on the back of the produce. I mean, you're just a little bit more thoughtful and a little bit more careful. And that's what experience does. But when you're young, you're not thinking about those things. And unfortunately, in our community, one false step could ruin your whole life. Whereas in other communities, you can make a false step and then you may have someone there. And I see it in the courtroom all the time. Say, you know what, refer them to that program. And that young person gets referred to a program. And before you know it, they have a union card. They have gainful employment. They have a beautiful family and they're making six figures, you know, building homes. There's six figures working with the Department of Environmental Protection, working with the Department of Transportation, and they're able to overcome that misstep. Whereas for many of us in our communities, one misstep and you don't get a second chance at it. You make a misstep, these are the consequences. And a lot of times, the reference point that our young people have may be the hip hop industry. They hear about shooting, killing, and it's glorified and it sounds good, but none of these rappers tell you about the consequences. They don't tell you behind that trigger that you're about to pull right now, maybe 40 years of your life taken away.
Mhm.
Behind that blunt you're about to smoke right now, that blunt may be laced and have you do something that make you end up in Rikers Island or in jail. They're not telling you that. They're just telling you, it's cool to have a gun. It's cool to have quote unquote beautiful ladies around and mistreat them and this is part of the game. And you're actually using that as a reference point on how an adult's supposed to act. So I give them those lessons and the coaches that I have around me. Our purpose is not teaching football. It's about teaching a game of life. So we're very cognizant of that. that, football is really not our aim. Although we teach it very well, the game of football very well, and we've won championships, etc. But that means nothing if these young people cannot make the transition from being a teenager to an adult, a solid adult.
Well, something that you mentioned earlier, you said that Islam was huge factor in your life. And so for the purposes of the audience, I know that you reverted to Islam. Could you tell that story and how that came to be?
Of course, when we think about Islam, first I have to say this. My grandmother was very spiritual. She was a Catholic woman from Haiti, and she ensured that every night before I went to sleep that I prayed. She made sure that I understood that there was a being that was greater than I who cared about me. And although there were some aspects of the faith practices that didn't resonate with me through the Catholic Church, I always understood that I was God's child, and she made sure of that, right? So as I got a little bit older, for me in 1990, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan came to the Civic Center. He spoke on a subject called "Add It Up," and during that speech, he basically answered a lot of questions I had as a young person. Some of the questions that I had was, I didn't understand how could three entities be in one and one calling the entity God, but that entity that called God was God. So that was hard for me to kind of accept. And at the time, Minister Farrakhan broke that down, and he made it relevant to my experience that, growing up and seeing images of statues that didn't look like me and that folks were genuflexing to or bowing down to, I couldn't understand that. And having all these like misunderstandings brought me closer to Islam. And I saw Islam as a religion of peace. I saw that it was a religion that cared about humanity, and that resonated with me. And I tell everyone, when you talk about faith, I don't like to talk about labels, because labels means nothing. It's the principles or the substance behind the labels that really matter. So if you're a good Christian, you and I are going to get along very well. If I'm a good Muslim, I should get along well with good Christians or good Buddhists or good Hindus, or agnostics, and even good atheists. If you're a good person, it goes beyond label, because anyone could call themselves anything. Oh, I'm my Lord and Savior. But if you're not acting according to the mandates of your Lord and Savior, then your Lord and Savior really has no effect on your life. If you're not acting in accordance to the goodwill of the prophet, peace be upon him, then that prophet doesn't have nothing to do with your life. You can't say, you're a follower of a man who was, or a woman who was a worthy person, who was a faithful person, who was just a good person, and you're acting wild out there. You can't claim that religion, and you shouldn't claim that religion. So I really don't get fixated with labels per se. I would rather, let's look at the heart and the substance of who that particular person is. And then from there, I should be informed about what your religion is. It's how you act, my observation of who you are, that really informs me of your faith practice and your faith tradition. So my road to Islam was one that was sparked by hearing a lecture in April 1990 while I was in Atlanta, Georgia, by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
It seems like you've had so many valuable lessons along the way, with your work, with your faith, with working with young people, and in just listening to you sharing a little bit about your family and seeing the heart that you have for your kids. I wanted to ask, how have those life experience influenced the way that you raise your kids now?
Going back to the life experience that I had with Fatima, one of the things that made me a lot more sensitive to women's rights was the conversations I used to have with Fatima. So when I had my daughter, I know that I became a better father to a daughter based on those experiences, those conversations, because we used to have plenty of conversations around how women feel and how they should be treated, and how men and women working together would be able to produce these special young people. and part of my womanist views that I have. And yes, Fatima, at times I am a womanist, all right?
Okay. I probably taught you that from Spelman because we don't say
Yeah.
feminist, we say
Yeah,
womanist.
there you go. There you go. See, I've learned well. And those
Right.
were conversations from 30 years ago.
Right.
Wow.
I think it really helped me to be a lot more sensitive to my daughter and how she was raised, as far as hearing her a lot differently, as she became older. And it's from those past experiences and those past discussions that I've had with some really good friends, and Fatima being one of the good friends that I've had. So yes, those experiences I think informed me about being a father. And although I haven't gotten everything right, not even close. However, I think there are a few good things that I've done based on those experiences. But as a father and as a parent, you never feel as if you've done a good job. Never. And I've come, I've resolved that within myself, that that's never going to be the case no matter what. And sometimes I look back, I'm like, man, you know what? If I had the energy of a young person right now, I would be a darn good father. Just saying,
No.
do this over again, man, that child will be blessed. But I know I don't have that energy nor the patience. So
Well, see, the thing is, I always think of you, Jacques, as one of the men that formed in my life and in my mindset. I never had that idea that men are dogs that sometimes goes around because I had a Jacques Léandre in my life at a very young age. And so while you may not think that you didn't do it right, I think that is the litmus test of a great parent because there is humility and always striving and not feeling like, well, this is how it was done before, so I'm going to still do it like that. All of us are fallible, but the idea that we can accept the fact that we're fallible, I think makes us better parents. And so I really commend you. Over the years. I've watched, how your kids have grown and now they're out in the world. And so you should be a proud papa and your wife should be a proud mama. Speaking of which, last season we talked about an episode on dating, and both of us are single and we're women of faith, and so we don't date in the typical way that the society dates, if at all. So we had a conversation
all right,
about emotional intimacy and just relationships. So we were really curious. I know that you deal with your young men as they're going through dating. Your daughter might be going through dating. What are your feelings about the current state of relationships right now, if any?
wow. But I see, I didn't sign up for all this, Fatima.
we got you. We got to get what
You
we
got-
can.
I mean, these are some no, these are some real powerful questions. And the reason why I say that is when you look at the condition of our community, these are topics really we should be discussing all the time, because you don't learn this in higher education. Although I think this is really important, like freshman orientation, a component of it should have interpersonal relationships with the other gender. Like that should be a topic that is explored, that's talked about. And really, that should be a topic that's talked about for the 4 years that you're in college. And maybe even prep towards even in high school. Because for the most part, once you reach a certain age, thinking about a spouse may preoccupy most of your day sometimes, as human beings. Like we were made to socialize in that way. We were made to be with a spouse, period. And this is something that's not even taught, is not even talked about. And a lot of churches don't even talk about it now, and some mosques don't even talk about how important it is to talk about courtship. And I learned how to the value of courtship through the mosque. It was a very integral part of my young Muslim life to learn about male and female relationships. And the minister had made a series of tapes on male and female relationships, the proper handling of men, the proper handling of women. And I think that's one of the things that helped my wife and I out tremendously, was being enrolled in those courses to learn about how to approach the other gender, how to treat the other gender, and understanding women needs, and understanding as a man your duty, and understanding that also male and female relationships are so complex that it has to be maintained. You can never say, oh, I got it. The person that you married is not the same person 15 years from the marriage. It's not the same person 5 years from the marriage. So now how are you going to pivot to accommodate their growth? And how are you going to pivot to accommodate your growth and still maintain, the vision of becoming one? And a lot of that has to do with understanding like human dynamics, male and female dynamics, that no, we are not the same. No, we're totally different. We process information differently. We react to stimuli differently. Like we're different. And because we're different doesn't mean that we have to now say there's no equality. You could be different and still have equality. And I think that's what a lot of us don't understand. No, I'm the same. No, we're not the same. I should be able to do this because he's doing that. I should be able
That
to
used to
do
be one
this.
of our arguments.
That was one of our arguments because she's doing that. No, we're different. And
And I have changed a lot on that. Equity is what we're looking for, not equality. Yeah.
correct. Correct. And there's a difference between the two, and we don't get there because we're so stuck in our way. And the way the society makes us think about various things is actually the breakdown of the family. We took away the accolades that should be associated with cooking. We're not going to argue this. Well,
I don't know why I felt a really tense moment right there.
and I say that to say the society will make you think that, well, if you're cooking for your family, all of a sudden that's a subservient role that you're taking as part of your family. That's a role that you should not embrace, as opposed to looking at it as, well, she's not cooking for a family. She's actually becoming a food scientist for her family. She's finding what is the best way to keep her family healthy. What is the
Why does
best
it have to be
Oh,
she?
I'm going.
Okay.
I was going to get to the mail. See, you didn't allow me to finish
Right. Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
because most men who cook don't feel that that role is a degrading role.
Mm-hmm.
Most women who embrace that role, they're taught that you are being degraded by embracing that role. Most men are not saying, "Well, I feel degraded because I prepared a meal for my family." Most men don't feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
Most men that cook. I think there's a lot of pressure on women who cook for their family to feel, well, if I'm cooking and they see me just as a cook for the family, I'm degraded in my role. And you may not feel that way, but from my experience. Whereas for me as a man, and by the way, there's a lot of good that came out of COVID. Because of COVID, your man here knows how to cook, all right? And I learned how to cook because there was really nothing else to do. And I found it fascinating when I always knew how to make eggs. Like I'm the best egg maker in the house. Like my eggs, really, I make like the best omelet. I make that was before COVID. But since COVID, I was able to go on YouTube and started messing around and ended up making some good meals to where my son was like, yo, dad, yo, this is good. And I didn't know cooking was that easy. Not that I'm a great cook, but it was a lot easier than I thought. My daughter, dad, oh my God, I made smothered chicken for them. I don't eat chicken, but I made it for them watching YouTube. And it was like, oh my God, this is the bomb. Mom, come check this out. And I actually cook and enjoy cooking and also realize the benefits of it. Like I was able to put together the ingredients. I knew exactly. I bought some organic chicken. I bought, I used Miss Dash. You're laughing. David's laughing. You can't
I'm
believe
not laughing. I'm applauding. I'm proud
Yeah.
of you.
And I put it together and just watched this raw thing come into existence. I made, some veggie casserole, and I saw it as this is something that's helping my family. It was something that I learned how to do. And I believe in this society, some of those things that are healthy for family are degraded. Some of those things that are good for the family are not looked upon in reverence. So you'll find, men, they want to be players because the world tells them, the more girls you have, the more chicks you have, the more of a man you are. As opposed to saying, nah, bro, listen, The woman is the greatest gift that God could give to you. The greatest gift is the woman. Brother, you should think about having a woman that you could dedicate your life to, because by doing that, you're going to receive the greatest blessings and gifts that man could ever have. No one is telling us that. It's the opposite. You'll have a couple of chicks on the side, and if you're able to juggle them and they don't find out, you're the man. If you do the other stuff, you're simping. You're a simp. And because we're not taught properly how to interact with each other, that's why we have some of these disastrous relationships. That's why men and women are not, there's no harmony there between men and women. So getting back to your original questions, Fatima, I'm sorry to be talking too much in terms of your dating piece and the courtship piece. There's a science behind courting. There's a science behind it. And the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said there's three sciences that they prevented the slaves from actually knowing. He said the first was the science of business, the science of warfare, and the science of mating. Like there's actually a science to mating. There's a science to men and women. It's so important to God that he just wouldn't leave it as something that's happenstance by luck. We're supposed to run into each other and have babies and bring in the most important things into the world by luck. There's a science to it. There's an art form to it. There's mathematics to it. And part of that is not taught, you know. And one of the things the minister has taught us is when you're looking for a mate, you should first examine yourself and see what your deficiencies are, see what your strengths are, and then see if you could get someone who's compatible that will help you with your deficiencies, that will strengthen your strengths. And if you don't know yourself, you'll never be able to attract a mate that could fulfill what I just talked about, because you don't know who you are. You don't know what your strengths are. And you have to look at yourself and be honest. Like, you know what? Yeah, I'm short-tempered when it comes to such and such. So therefore, I may not need someone who has the same deficiency that I have. I may need someone that could identify that deficiency and help me to eradicate it. Help me to make it a strength of mine. Help me to make that a strength. And by examining yourself and knowing yourself will help you to identify a mate who would have the same kind of approach to selecting a mate, you know?
Yeah, I love that. So last season's we talked about relationships, and one of the things we said is, a lot of times we just focus on chemistry, but
Mhm.
really it's chemistry because you do have to have the polarity so that you can have the attraction. But there's also compatibility. And you don't have to be the same in everything, but you have to have compatible core values. And I think people are looking at compatibility. Oh, we both like to swim. We both like to hike. No, we both believe in God. We both believe family first. We both believe taking care of our parents when they're older.
There
And
you
then
go.
the third one is connection. And that's that emotional intimacy that I realized that I didn't grow up with. And so I had to do a lot of work around what does it really mean to be able to be emotionally intimate. And one of those things is to identify your needs and be able to express your needs to the other person. Men admitting that they need women and women admitting that they need men has been one of the things that has caused this tension between men and women because both are trying to say now they don't really need the other. So
I really think that this is a very important part of our discussion. And
um,
when we talk about community development, I believe this aspect of family is so vital and critical to our communities developing. And
mm,
this is something that we really don't talk about. This is something that we put to the side and don't recognize how important it is for us to develop this aspect of our community. Someone had asked before, do you believe in arranged marriages? And I said, I don't believe in arranged marriages, but I do believe in arranged environments where we could arrange environments where those two individuals could actually determine whether or not they'll be good for each other. And part of that is understanding, because you do have in different societies where you do have arranged marriages, and it works really well in their particular culture and society. And so there's a lot of value to that. I think in our culture or society, though, although arranged marriages may not necessarily initially work right now, but there's ways to have arranged environments where, for instance, we could create environments where young people could have healthy relationships with the opposite sex. And we don't focus on that enough.
can you
So
give me an example? What do you mean by that?
I'll give you a great example. If you have two families on the block, and those two families have very similar outlooks on life, maybe their faith is the same, or maybe some of their interests is the same. They like to go to museums. Their sons engage in football activities or cheer activities of cheerleader football, right? I think those two families should probably spend time together with the young people and watch them develop in those particular environments that you set and see what comes out of it. For instance, in our mosque, we have several couples who are together as they're young couples, they're in their 30s, early 40s, and they came together because they were placed in an environment where the elders was watching them as they grew up together.
Well, 30 and 40 isn't young.
No,
I thought you were going to say teenagers.
no. I'm saying they're 30s and 40s now, but I've watched them
Oh,
as teenagers.
okay. That's a good clarification. Right,
Yeah. No, they got together in their 20s, like early,
okay, right. Got it.
you know. And because, for instance, they went to the same schools that didn't have a formal prom, we kind of had like a prom for them. And we watched them, we watched them grow up. And we put them in an environment where they ended up having an attraction for each other when that time happened. We had them enter into a formal courtship process. And through that courtship process, they ended up marrying each other. We created an environment for that to take place. And we were intentional about it as adults. And because as adults, you could somewhat see, oh, okay, those two like each other. And they may not even know they like each other. They think, oh, I don't like her. And a couple of years later, oh, I don't like him. He's not my style. And knowing, no, he's going to be a style. It's just, it's
Well,
just going to take.
I like that focus on arranged environments versus arranged marriage.
In the nation, we have a formal courtship process. And
Mhm.
in that courtship process, and it's called courtship because you're taking a person to court. You want to find out where's the evidence. And
Mhm.
and you want to make sure that that evidence is not tainted by premarital intercourse,
Mhm.
because sex is an intoxicant. It could get you drunk. And if that evidence is tainted, now you got to have a mistrial. and, and because of the force of nature of sex, it could literally taint how you view someone, how you view the evidence. You'll look and be like, oh, he just had 3 bankruptcies. That's okay. He's probably good with money now. As opposed to
Mhm.
looking at it, this person is not good with finances. I'm not good with finances. We can't get together. This is going to be a
Right, right.
horrible life. But the courtship process is so important that you now look at the way that as the evidence come in, you can weigh it properly when your brain is not foggy. Because if you're intoxicated, you can't make rational decisions on something that important. And what happens is when you fall in love with the mind of the person and the heart of the person, that becomes almost secondary to the heart and to the mind. And you really can fall in love with a heart and mind of a person when you're not intoxicated, when you're not drunk by that. Because once you get into that force, God made that force so powerful that you'll start making excuses for everything. Oh, he didn't really say that. You know what? I could change him, or I could change her. No, you know what? I could make her into a housewife. Or and so
We're
explain.
laughing because that was one of our arguments back in the past. Housewife or career woman trying to do both. But anyway, that's a side quest conversation.
Well,
Yeah, no, but I get it. I get it. You do. You try to bend reality.
try to bend. That's a good way to put it. Bend
Yeah,
reality.
yeah.
And that happens a lot. So that's why the courtship process is so important, because if you haven't gone past that step, it's easier to say no, and her reputation is intact and your reputation is intact.
Right.
And it's not like a candy store. Let me try this flavor, that doesn't work. That's a very serious process. And what happens too, if you go through that process and you violated that particular law, now you may say, shoot, I don't want her to think about me in this way. I don't want her reputation hurt. So therefore, I'm going to go through with the most important decision of my life. So now you're almost making a decision based on the fact that you don't want to hurt her reputation because of the guilt that you feel because you violated that particular law. So that's why it's also important when we have our courtship process, and we may say, I'm a grown ass man. I don't need to be in a courtship process going on a date with other couples, etc. It's important because that particular pull is stronger than gravity. You may say I'm strong, but as soon as things get a little hot and heated, all kind of things are, well, no, I'm gonna touch a hand and it's not gonna go any further than this. Then before you know it, you end up in a world of misery.
Right. And it's not just the sex, but having
Yeah.
other people around and doing it as a community experience with people who know that that's what they're there for. They
Right.
can be the second eyes and ears. So when you're starting to feel your emotions or whatever, such and such is there to say, well, did you realize he did that? Or you might be in your feelings and say, well, they could say, well, look at the good he did. So it really is, I think we have to think of another way, because the way that we're kind of going down the society, I don't think is working. So I'm glad we, had a chance to explore that a little bit. So I guess just two more questions. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received, or the best piece of advice you'd like to leave the audience with?
Man, your audience, I know they can tell by now that I did not have these questions beforehand. The best piece of advice that I received, I believe, came from directly from my dad. He said, time waits for no one. And he said, do what you need to do, because no matter what, time is going to keep moving. And it was the advice that I received right before I went to law school, because at the time I was still on the fence. I was like, man, if I'm going to go to law school, I'm going to leave this, what I thought was a good paying job with Bankers Trust, and not have money for 2.5 years and be
I remember that.
and,
Yeah.
and be broke. And you may not remember this, Fatima. I had to put a deposit down for school. And at the time, you lent me $300. You probably don't even remember it, do you?
I remember it because that was the thing. I felt like we could just like share everything, and yeah, we were very
And you,
generous with each other. Yeah.
yeah, and you lent me $300, and I gave you back your money during the time period that you had established. And my dad, and at the time, my dad said, at the time I was 24, and he said, okay, you're 24 now. He said, in 3 years, how old are you going to be? And I said, I'll be 27. He said, okay, in 3 years, if you go to law school, you'll be 27 and a lawyer, or in 3 years, if you don't go to law school, you'll just be 27 and not a lawyer. He said, but those 3 years are going to go by no matter what. He said, you can't hold those 3 years. You can't stop those 3 years from moving. He said, those 3 years will continue to move. He said, so put everything you can in those 3 years, because time is going to move. And if you don't move with time, you're going to be stuck in the same place that you were 3 years from now. And I said, man, because he brought it to the forefront, like, don't wait. Why wait? And kind of the same thing happened with my marriage too, It's like, you like this girl, you like her a lot, and our families get along. She's a bright young lady, da da da. What are you waiting for? Well, Dad, I don't have the kind of money I want. You're not going to have the money you want. It's not going to happen. You're not going to, quote unquote, ever be ready. You could be a little bit better prepared, but you're not going to be ready. Marriage is a different beast. And he told me that's going to be the most important decision you make in your life. Wow. He said, it's going to make you a boy or make you a man. And so that's the best advice that I've received. And I think the best advice that I've given was the advice that I received from my dad and the elders in the community that I give to the young people. Everything that I've learned, I try to pour it into them so they won't make some of the mistakes that I've made. And one of the things I tell the young people, the best advice I think I may have given them, learn from other people's mistakes. Don't learn from your mistakes necessarily. You can learn from other people's mistakes, so you won't have to make those mistakes to learn from. So, it's very important to look at other people's lives and see where they've gone wrong and improve upon that. So I stayed looking at other people's mistakes and saying, okay, I won't do that.
Okay. Well, last but not least,
I thought that
what's
was the last question, but go
no,
ahead.
no.
I'm loving this
I said
conversation.
it.
Fatima, we and Liz, we could be here all night.
All day, right. No, this is the final one. So the final question that we like to ask everybody, Jacques, and thank you again for your time. Every question that we ask, you gave a nugget, you gave some inspiration, you gave people a direction. And so for that, we're very thankful. I believe you're a super person. My question to you is, what do you believe is your superpower? What is your gift? What is your divine present from God?
Great question. First, since this is the last question, I must say I've had an absolutely joy being on the coffee break, and this has been a blessing, and I feel enriched by being on this interview with you all. And just, I kind of miss having these kind of discussions because they're just discussions where there's no pretension involved and it's just real discussions. And in this world today, it's hard to come across having real discussions in judgment-free zone like this. Although millions of people will be tuning in to this to this platform, but I think my superpower is, and I say this in a very humble way because I thank God for it. But He's given me, I think, a power of discernment, and I'm able to analyze things rather quickly and analyze people rather quickly. And I think that's a power that He's given me, where I've been right most of the time about folks. Where there have been times where I'm like, oh, my bad. Uh, I prejudge this person, but for the most part, he's been able to give me a power of discernment, which has been like a guiding principle for me. And when I listen to that power, and I and act and that power, there's great manifestation that comes out of it. When I ignore it, that's when I kick myself in the backside, like, "Dag, Jacques, you know better. You should have listened to your first inclination." And so I think that power of discernment is one that He's given me that I've been able to use throughout my life and to help others with as well.
That's something you and Liz have in common, her power of discernment. She's always observing and has her finger on the pulse of people's spirits and their intentions and
Wow.
that. So, yeah, well, it's just been great talking to you today. What's next for you? What platforms can people find you? Is there anything coming up in the fall that you're excited about that we can promote?
Absolutely. Well, we just kicked off our fall football and cheer program. If you live in Jamaica, Queens, or within the five boroughs, Manhattan, Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, of course, or even on Long Island, on Staten Island, you could join us at rosedalejets.com. That's ROSEDALE, Jets, JETS.com. And of course, if you want to support young people and support the work that we're doing, you could also zell us at rosedalejets@gmail.com and help us with the mighty work that we're doing. And you could also check us out on our website at rosedalejets.com and see the wonderful work we're doing with our young people here in the community. Fatima, thank you. And Liz, thank you. And I pray that God provides you all with tremendous success with this platform and the coffee break. I appreciate y'all.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. To learn more about today's guests and find related links and resources, visit the episode page at nexusexperience.com. You'll also find our full podcast archive and a free 10-page workbook with 4 powerful journal prompts to help you reconnect with yourself.
If you'd like to support the podcast, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And if you enjoyed this episode, leave a review letting us know. Sharing the show with friends is also incredibly helpful. You can find us at Inside Coffee Break on Instagram and TikTok. For updates, subscribe to our newsletter on Substack via the footer of our website at nexusexperience.com. Today's show was edited by our co-host, Grace Chung. We appreciate your love and support. See you in the next episode.